I don't have it, man.
You think I'm playing games out here? Where is it?
He was only 21 years old, a hard-working soldier, a beloved big brother, and the protector of his entire family. But on a quiet stretch of desert road just outside Barstow, California, Scott Howard Allison's life was taken in a way no one could ever imagine. His body was found stuffed inside a sleeping bag, his belongings scattered across the highway like someone wanted to erase him from the world. A young man who carried his siblings up the stairs, now left alone in the desert. Who killed Scott? Why was he targeted? And after 47 years, why does this case remain unsolved? Scott Howard Allison's story begins in Percy, Pennsylvania, where he grew up surrounded by a loving young family who adored him from the very beginning. Born the oldest of 4 children, Scott naturally stepped into the role of protector, leader, and quiet hero. His parents described him as the kind of child who made life easier simply by being in the room, helpful, caring, and always willing to share the load. In 1973, everything changed when the family moved across the country to Bakersfield, California. Scott was a senior in high school at the time, and he was given a rare choice for a teenager: stay behind in Pennsylvania with his grandparents, or move with his parents and siblings to an entirely new world. Despite the comfort of staying with Grammy and Pop-Pop, Scott chose what he always chose: his family. He packed up, climbed into the car, and helped drive his siblings and the family's 2 dogs all the way to California. And that selflessness wasn't just a personality trait, it was something his siblings felt deeply. His brother Craig remembers falling into a frozen pond as a child, nearly developing hypothermia. Craig couldn't walk for weeks. But what he remembers most wasn't the cold or the fear, it was Scott carrying him up and down the stairs, day after day, without a single complaint. His sister Kelly remembers her own moment of weakness, when she too was injured and couldn't move around the house freely. Once again, it was Scott who carried her, gently, patiently, as if nothing mattered more than making sure she was safe. To his siblings, Scott wasn't just a brother. He was their anchor, their shield, their first best friend. And to family friends, he was a child deeply cherished. A family friend once said that Scott was the pride and joy of everyone who helped raise him, the boy who was always smiling, always trying, always loving. But it's these same memories that would later become painful reminders of everything they lost. Because nearly 50 years later, Craig and Kelly still speak of their brother in the present tense, as if he is still right there beside them. And in a way he is. Scott Howard Allison left a mark on everyone he touched, but his story was cut short at only 21 years old. Scott's life in Bakersfield continued the same way it began, full of responsibility, passion, and kindness. In high school, he joined the varsity wrestling team, not because he wanted attention, but because he loved pushing himself. His younger brothers were so inspired by him that they followed in his footsteps. To this day, Craig still keeps Scott's Letterman jacket hanging right next to his own, a symbol of brotherhood and memories frozen in time. Scott wasn't flashy. He wasn't the type of young man who needed the world to notice him. His style was simple: jeans, a t-shirt, a flannel, and he wore an easy smile that revealed a chipped tooth his family remembers with affection. He had deep, warm eyes, short, dark curls that looked like a natural perm, and a presence that made everyone feel safe. His love for music was one of his strongest traits. Stevie Wonder was his favorite, and any time Scott bought a new record, he and his cousin Phil had a tradition. They listened to the entire album together. No distractions, no rushing. Just music, family, and the feeling of being young in the 70s. One of the sweetest stories comes from Kelly, his little sister. They were at an amusement park, and she desperately wanted someone to ride the Gravitron with her, a spinning ride that pins riders against the wall with centrifugal force. Nobody wanted to go except Scott. Even though he didn't like the ride, he stepped forward, held her hand, and rode it with her again and again, until he finally threw up. And even then he laughed it off, happy that he made his little sister happy. Scott was also responsible beyond his years. He worked as a trash collector after high school, saving every dollar he could. Their cousin once saw Scott's savings jar and told Kelly it was the most money he had ever seen at the time. Scott was planning for something more, a future, independence, adulthood. Shortly after high school, he joined the United States Army. It felt like a natural step for someone as strong, disciplined, and protective as he was. His family was proud, hopeful, and excited for what Scott's life would become. But no one, not Scott, not his family, not anyone, could have predicted how suddenly and violently that future would be stolen. September 1977 should have been a happy time for the Allison family. Scott had been stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and was planning a visit home to California. His younger siblings, Kelly and Mark, were thrilled. They climbed a tree in the front yard, waiting for him for hours, staring down the street for the first glimpse of their big brother's car. They waited until sunset, until their mother finally told them to come inside. But the excitement didn't fade. They knew Scott was coming. They just had to be patient. The last time anyone spoke to him was September 4th, 1977. Scott called his mother and told her he would be home in 10 hours. It was a simple, hopeful call, the kind every mother treasures. But when those 10 hours passed, there was no Scott, no car, no phone call. His mother immediately called law enforcement to file a missing person report, but the police told her it was too soon. Not enough time had passed. This was the 1970s, a different era, a time when missing adults were often dismissed as runaways, misunderstandings, or delays. But Scott wasn't any of those things. His mother knew something was wrong. She felt it. Meanwhile, Scott was already gone. Somewhere between Fort Campbell and his home in California, something terrible happened, something that took his life before his family even realized he was missing. The following day, that fear became reality. A body was discovered in the desert 14 miles west of Barstow, California. It was inside a sleeping bag, abandoned in the sand under the open sun. Authorities searched the area and soon found scattered personal belongings thrown along the road, items that told a story of panic and violence. Among them was a gift Scott had bought for his little brother Mark, a birthday present he never got to deliver. Police determined that whoever killed Scott stole his car and tossed his belongings out as they drove. A young soldier, excited to see his family, had been murdered and discarded like nothing. And just like that, the joyful expectation of a homecoming turned into a grief that would haunt the Allison family for the next 47 years and beyond. Scott's death shattered the Allison family in a way that time could never truly repair. His siblings described the change as immediate and devastating. His brother Craig explained it simply, "It took my parents to a different place. Losing a child is something no parent is ever prepared for. Losing one so violently, so suddenly, without answers, that kind of pain never fades." Scott's parents became quieter, more withdrawn, shadows of the hard-working, loving people they once were. The home that used to be filled with loud siblings, music, and laughter now felt heavy, grieving, incomplete. For Kelly and Craig, the world suddenly felt colder. They had lost their protector, the one who carried them when they couldn't walk, the one who rode carnival rides until he got sick just to see them smile. Mark, the youngest brother, grew up holding on to a gift from Scott that he never got to receive. But grief wasn't the only aftermath. Confusion, frustration, and anger also took root. The investigation stalled quickly. There were no major suspects, no leads strong enough to pursue. Scott had been murdered on a long stretch of remote highway, a location that made evidence scarce and witnesses non-existent. The police believed his car had been stolen. But who took it? Why target Scott? Was it a random act of violence? A robbery gone wrong? Something connected to the military? No one knew. And decades later, they still don't. The Allison family tried to stay strong, but their lives were never the same. Craig and Kelly eventually grew up, had children of their own, and built their own families, but they carried Scott with them everywhere. Kelly named her daughter after him. Craig keeps Scott's Letterman jacket hanging in his closet, untouched. These small acts became sacred rituals, ways to honor the brother who should have grown old with them. Kelly also became the guardian of nearly all the family's photo albums. She kept Scott's memory alive through pictures, stories, and the emotional scrapbook that still sits in her home. And as the years passed, one thing became clear. Scott's life mattered too much to let him become another forgotten case. So Kelly did something brave, something that would reignite hope nearly 5 decades later. Nearly 50 years after Scott's murder, the Allison family still has no answers, no arrest, no justice, no closure. But they refuse to let his memory fade. Kelly, now a grown woman with her own children, created a public Facebook page dedicated to Scott's life and unsolved case. She filled it with photos, stories, and updates, not only to seek information, but to keep her brother alive in the hearts of the people who loved him. The page eventually reached Project Cold Case and the University of North Florida's Applied Journalism class, a collaboration that helps families share the stories of loved ones whose murders remain unsolved. Scott's story became one of those cases. Through their work, more people learned about the young soldier who never made it home. More people learned about the bright, strong, music-loving 21-year-old who was robbed of his future. And more people became aware of just how fragile justice can be when evidence is scarce and decades pass. Today, Scott's siblings continue to advocate for him. Craig often says, "He was the best big brother a person could have." Kelly calls him her protector, a title he earned long before he ever put on a military uniform. The case remains open. Someone, somewhere, knows what happened that night in September 1977. Someone knows who killed Scott, took his car, and left him in the desert. Someone has carried that secret for nearly half a century, but cold cases never truly die. Not as long as families keep pushing, not as long as stories are shared, not as long as people like you, viewers, listeners, and true crime communities, keep the memory alive. Scott deserved to come home. He deserved to grow old, raise a family, and live the life he worked so hard to build. Instead, he became another victim of a senseless crime. But his story is not forgotten. And maybe, with enough awareness, enough voices, enough pressure, the truth can still come out. Scott Howard Allison's life mattered, his memory matters. And his story is not over. Nearly 5 decades have passed, but for Scott's family, time has never healed the wound. It has only deepened the silence. His siblings still hold his jacket, his photos, and their memories close, hoping that one day, someone will finally speak up. Cases like Scott's Dante stay cold because the truth is gone. They stay cold because the right voice hasn't come forward yet. If you know anything about what happened on that desert road in 1977, no matter how small, please contact authorities. Scott deserves justice. His family deserves peace. Thank you for watching. If you believe stories like Scott's should never be forgotten, please support our mission by subscribing to Real Crime Pulse, turning on notifications, and sharing this video. Your support helps keep these cases alive. And together, we keep their names remembered.